video assumes you already know how to sharpen a convex edge. The beveled edges and all other shears are variations on the theme. You just take usually fewer steps on doing a beveled edge over a convex edge. So I'm just going to walk you through it. I'm not going to go through the complete sharpening. Your typical beveled edge that you're going to get from a salon is going to be something kind of cheap. This is actually a Pakistan made thing that we've been playing around here in the office. It's actually got a serrated that we've been playing with a serration on it. Typically, if there's a nice serrated edge and it looks good on here, I'll leave it alone, sharpen the one side. If the serration is like this, it's half there, half gone, I'll take it all the way off and I'll tell the hairstylist, if it's a stylist, that it'll be smoother and sharper with it gone, which is the absolute truth. If they insist on having serrations on their shears, you can take the serration off and then put it back on by hand. That's another video. We won't go there. But on this type of shear, there's very little hollow to it. Almost nothing. So I wouldn't even bother taking it apart. Anytime you're not working the ride line, I don't take them apart for a couple of reasons. One, it saves time. Number two, every time you take that screw out, you run risk. You run a risk of losing the screw. You run a risk of not being able to hold the screw better. It's just, it doesn't make sense to go through the chances of that you can run into trouble taking the screw out. You can always, if there's dirt, debris under here, you can always run some dental floss under there. But if the screw is holding and it's adjusted reasonably correct, I'd leave it alone. I use my red Sharpie a lot so that I can get the correct angle. If the angle that's on there has been put on incorrectly by another sharpener, then you just decide on what angle you want. But I like to know what angle I'm beginning with. So I would put this in the clamp without taking it apart, and you see I can clamp it in on that back area right here. As close to the ride as I can. Sometimes it has to be more on the handle, but if I can get it on the ride, that's even better. And on a beveled edge, I'm using a flat plate without any cushion. And depending on how much metal I need to take off, how deep the nicks are, the quality of the shear, it's what grit I'm going to be using. 1000 is very common for most of my beveled edges. Glue film, I'm going to write down what the angle is. Put my plate on my machine. Unlike the convex where I'm rotating it, this time I can tighten this nut and come in straight because I don't want a convex shape. I just want, so it's more of a helicopter landing than an airplane landing. And once again, for the right-handed shear, you're going the right direction. You can go, I'll just come in here and you work it and check for your burr, see if you've taken the red off, see if you're at the right angle. If you find that, like on this particular one, I'm taking the metal off quicker at the tip than at the back, if I tilt it up, it gets the back area better. And I'm doing a slight rock to get the tip to the back. And see, it's doing better. If, for instance, I was getting the back area and not the tip, which is more common, I would tilt it down more, and that seems to take off more metal at the tip. And you can always slide it across to be able to get that area right here at the tip. I typically don't pull it all the way out because, see, I can damage my tip that way, so I'll pull it this far out and stop. And then once I get that done, I'll flip it over, do the other side. After I've done those, then I will get a paper towel or double tissue, and I cut my burr off. And I cut like a section at a time until I get all the way down, and then I'll do maybe one more cut. Now this one I haven't sharpened, it's not cutting right, but and then get your tissue and check your cut. And obviously I haven't finished sharpening these, but you get the idea of how these are done. So that's a basic beveled edge. Surprisingly enough, it says basic. But this is a beveled edge that you would most commonly come across. Other beveled edges would be some of these two-piece beveled edges. This is a Yasaka, which is a fairly expensive shear. Check your angle on it. A lot of times these might be a little bit sharper, maybe a 40-degree, 45-degree angle. A lot of them use these for slide cutting. They do have a little bit of a hollow and a little bit of a ride, and it's a two-piece scissor. You see how the handle and the blade are together? Before I sharpen it, I make sure that screw is tight, because if that screw is not tight, it's not going to sharpen correctly. I would, because this is such a crazy screw, and because it's got all kinds of little plastic pieces in here, it is very, very easy to mess up the screw on these shears if you can avoid taking them apart. I would. So how do you do the rod line without taking them apart? One of these hone stones, and I can go in, and the tape in the back, I actually use Band-Aids on this, but the tape in the back allows me to get a more accurate angle. See, in doing that ride, can you see the red coming off? And then when I get to the tip, sometimes I'm not low enough, so I can flip it over where it's a little thicker in the back and get that tip. This is not as accurate as doing the water stone, taking it apart and doing it like we did in the other video, but it's as close as you can get to accuracy. So that's how I would do this type of shear. Let's set that one aside. Long dog grooming scissors. Usually these aren't taken apart unless they're convex edges. So if they're a beveled edge, you can put them in your clamp them down, and just come on. And can you see in here? I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's a shadow from here up. That area to here is not touching my plate, and it doesn't matter. I've done like 18-inch shears. Because of the curvature of the blade, it doesn't touch on the other side. So you can pull it across and get that whole blade. And as I'm pulling it, you see I'm doing a little bit of rotation so that I can follow that edge across. So that's the idea on these longer shears. And once again, I typically will cut off the burr, or you can use that hone stone that I was using earlier. So that's like a long scissor or dog grooming scissors. Curve shears. Curve shears, a lot of them are designed convex. And they were made straight, and then after they were made, they were curved. So you can't really go back in there and accurately give the same edge that was put on it when it was done in the factory. I will do a like a semi-convex, a slight bevel on them to get a curved shear. I will use my little arc hone and use the round side to work my inside right on them, which is perfect for that. And when I do the outside, and a lot of times I'll go ahead and take these apart just because they're, some of them are better shears than others. You can tell the difference. And on these, this is a bevel. I do not use the flat plate. I use the cushion plate. So here's a cushion plate that I've been using. I'm putting that on. See, it's a cushion. It's got a little bit of a give to it. And when I'm doing the curve shear on these, let me take these apart real quick. This blade is not the hardest one to do. This is the easiest one. And I'm going in just like a beveled edge. And then, but I'm going to have to bring it on out like this. You see how my tip is way up in the air? I'm going to come in here and follow it across. And I'm only worrying about working on this section of my plate. And I'm actually pushing down on it so that I can get that curve. So I'm coming in here. This is the more difficult of the two because it curves into your plate. So you have to make sure that you are coming in here and you're keeping that tip up in the air. Because if that touches, you can actually damage your tip, or if you've got a really long shear and it catches over here, it can be a problem. So I'm pulling it across. You see this? And now I'm pulling the arm going this way. And I'm coming in here. And only like the last quarter of an inch is actually touching my plate. That tip is the hardest one to get, so you're going to have to kind of play with it. At this point, because I've already worked my ride line and I've recreated the outside, sometimes I'll go in and use my arc hone again to remove my burr. Sometimes I'll just cut off the burr. It just sort of depends on the quality of the shear and how are they using them. So that's a curved shear. And that's also sharpened like a beveled edge. Other beveled edge shears are just your typical sewing scissors. They may give you anything. Pinking shears is the same thing. Just a shear, a scissor is a scissor, a shear is a shear. And I put them in the clamp without taking them apart, even like those kitchen scissors. Get your plate, your flat plate, just come in here, create a burr, take it off. This is where you might want to use some really coarse paper. Something like this is a 60 micron or an 80 or 100 on these. You understand, on these beveled edges, when you're not going with a sharp edge, you don't really want it really smooth and shiny. You're going to need a little bit of tooth to it. This is a fishbone, which is a sword edge. So it's like a really, really, really wide bevel. And then this is all these little rainbow colored shears. These, if you look at them, do have a bevel on them. So on both of these, I would take them apart, work the rod line just like you do on the convex edge. And then on a flat plate, make sure you get the accurate angle and just create a burr and then go back and remove it off your waterstone. Same thing with this one. Now if this happens to be a fishbone shear, which is Bonika makes this, this is a 60-degree angle. So you're going to have your clamp set all the way up to 60 to create that. Look how much space is here. That has a really low radius. So on these ones with a low radius, I rotate them way down in my clamp. So in this case, if I was doing a fishbone or anything that has a nice curve to it, more rounded, I will move my stop up, all the way up, or take it off. And of course I would have taken these apart, but I would have a much lower angle, and that helps me get that tip better doing this.